Welcome to this edition of Case Law Review for our Namibia audience. This is in the Labour Court of Namibia. Shoprite Namibia versus Salvador. This is a case that came out in August 2025 and is an appeal on an arbitration award that deals with the difference between an employee assaulting a fellow co-worker in the context of a scuffle. So with other words, there's some kind of argument or fight at work, and whether that can be differentiated with a deliberate act of assault that is outside the context of that kind of scuffle, whereby an employee will simply walk up to a fellow colleague and then assault that person. It's quite interesting that in this case, the arbitrator basically found that the dismissal of this employee was procedurally fair, but substantively unfair. Quite interesting is the arbitrator found that the dismissal from a substantive perspective was for a valid reason but not a fair reason, and basically, as you know, that means that even though the employee is guilty of the offense itself, that the dismissal as a sanction was probably one step too far or maybe too harsh. Okay, so the employee is a grocery self-packer at Shoprite since 2020, and in December 2022 a scuffle broke out at work, okay, specifically between the employee and a fellow co-worker. So in this case, when I say applicant, I specifically mean the applicant in terms of the arbitration award, but obviously as far as the labour court process itself is concerned, the applicant now became the first respondent. So, but the applicant was a grocery self-packer since 2022, and in December since 2020, my apologies, but in December 2022 the scuffle broke out, and it is quite horrendous if you see what the detail of this scuffle really entailed. So in essence, the applicant found out that a co-worker called him a baboon, and that aggravated him and made him quite angry, and then he did the following. Whilst they were seated, he told the co-worker, who was a female employee, that she must close her legs, simultaneously hitting his own penis and sticking out his tongue. And at that point in time, the co-worker then threw him with a bottle, but the bottle missed. He then got up and then he punched her in the face, and then he also kicked her in the stomach. But here's the thing, she was 5 months pregnant. So remarkably, the arbitrator found that, yes, the employer did follow a fair procedure, so the dismissal, there's no problem with that. So the dismissal was ruled to be procedurally fair, but from a substantive perspective, the arbitrator found that the dismissal was for a valid reason, but not for a fair reason. So the employee was guilty of the offense, but the arbitrator found that, first of all, he had a clean disciplinary record. He also been working there for 3 years, and that the employer couldn't prove that, that this act of misconduct was severely prejudicial to the employer itself. And in addition, also, he drew a distinction between a deliberate act of assault and an assault that happens within the context of a scuffle. He basically found that, because it was happening in the context of a scuffle, that there's supposedly enough or sufficient mitigation in there that that him assaulting the co-worker was because of an act of being instigated or incited by the fellow co-employee, especially calling him a baboon. The Shoprite, the employer, then took it on appeal at the Labour Court, and the Labour Court then brought some more sense into this whole situation and basically said that what the reasoning of the arbitrator is not a reason that a reasonable decision maker can actually arrive at, okay? And they basically said, if you look at the acts of misconduct and the form of assault to the co-worker, the fact that she's 5 months pregnant, even, when she was then kicked in the stomach, she actually needed medical intervention because of it, and a severe form of sexual assault almost. the Labour Court found, but listen, this is not a decision that a reasonable decision maker can arrive at, and it is this kind of assault warrants a dismissal even on the first instance and the first offence. So they went. In addition, the Labour Court then found that, considering that a dismissal is justified in the first instance, there is really no differentiation between assault that happens in the context of a scuffle or whether it was deliberate. So there you have it. It was ruled that the dismissal itself was both procedurally and substantively fair, and the arbitration was therefore successfully overruled by the Labour Court. So see you again next time in Case Law Review. Bye-bye.